So the topic is MCQs and how it is that we can prepare, how it is that we can answer them. And we need to keep in mind with MCQs that there's really two elements to it. One is knowing what you're supposed to do and how to calculate the answer, and also doing it within a reasonable amount of time. Okay, every exam has an amount of time per question. Whatever, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever the case may be. You sit down and you know how many MCQs you have, and you know how much time you have. And so your goal is to answer as many of those questions correctly in the time that you have. And in order to do that, there's some things that we need to keep in mind for when we're taking the exam itself, some strategies for that. And also some things that we need to keep in mind as we're studying and as we're practicing to make certain that we practice properly so that when we get to the exam, we're actually doing the things that we need to do for the MCQs. And so I'll start with just a couple of tips about when you're practicing. And this is from the first day when you sit down and you don't even know how to launch the software yet, and it takes you a few minutes and you finally get your first question. So starting all the way from there, you need to remember that while you're studying, time is not your main goal. The first time you sit down and you do 10 questions, it's going to take you 30 minutes to do it or 40 minutes to do it. And you're going to get done and you're going to think, oh my goodness, it took me 4 minutes a question. I have a minute and a half per question. I'm never going to get done. That's fine. This is an area where there is a learning curve. The more you do, the better you get, the faster you get, you begin to understand how they ask questions, what it is that they're looking for. And also you need to keep in mind that while you're studying, your goal is learning, not time. That's why we don't have a timer when you're studying, because it may be that you answer the question and you get it wrong, and you want to spend a few minutes right then understanding why you got it wrong. Do that. You're studying. You're not taking the exam. The time doesn't matter. And so while you're studying, make certain that that's what you're trying to do, is learn the content. It's not a time test yet. It's not a race. It's not a how long does it take you. It's a matter of making certain that you learn that content. The speed, the minute and a half, the 2 minutes, whatever you have per question, that will come. And so also, as you go through all of the studying, you'll begin to recognize kind of some key words in questions. And so I just want to, if you haven't done this yet, point this out to you. Words like extreme words, always, never, none, every. I don't want to say that those are never the correct answer, but you need to remember that in what we're talking about, most of the topics we're talking about, if there's a theory question, never and always are kind of rare. There's always, using the word right now, there's usually an exception. There's usually a situation where always and never are not actually correct. And so when you see a word like always or never or every or none, spend a minute and think to yourself, is there a reason that this choice is immediately incorrect? And you can eliminate it. Just because it's not always the case, and it's not always never. So make certain that you take those extreme words and notice them. And also another one is if you're doing a numerical question and the answer is 0. So you have 5 or 4 choices, there's 3 numbers and 0. Ask yourself, is there a reason that 0 is automatically correct? Is there a reason what the question is about that I don't even have to do the numbers? I know 0 is correct. And an example is that in the process of a company paying dividends, there's never an account dividends payable. I'm sorry, there's never an account dividends expense. Okay, I think I'm right? Who's studying CMA Part 1? But anyway, there's never this dividend account that's set up. And so if that's the question, the answer 0 is automatically correct. Is there a reason? Is there something that causes 0 to automatically be correct? Because it doesn't exist. Okay, what they're asking you about is something that doesn't exist. Now, as I said, as you study, you're going to get better. When you get near the end and you have a couple of sections left, and especially after you're done studying and you're doing the reviews, that's when time starts to become important to you. When you're doing your review tests, when you're doing your mock exams, time is important and you need to start paying attention to your time. So let's talk about some time management tips and when we're actually sitting down and taking the exam. For a lot of candidates, and especially candidates where English is not your native language, time is an issue. And when time is an issue, it's not that you wanted another 40 minutes or another hour. It's usually just another 10 minutes would have been enough. And so what we want to make certain is you're going through your exam, you're not wasting time unnecessarily. You want to make certain you're trying to save the time that you can. So here's the first thing. When there's a question that's a long question, just you haven't even read it, you see there's a lot of information. What you need to do is first read the question. What is the question that they're asking you? And if you see that the question is about a topic that you never really felt completely comfortable with, when you're going through the exam the first time, do not spend time on this long question that you are not absolutely certain about. You're going to spend 5 minutes. You're going to do the math, and the number you come up with isn't going to be one of the choices. And you've just wasted 5 minutes. So what you do when there's a long question, a lot of information, a lot of calculations, read the question. If it's something you're comfortable with and you know how to do, do it. But if you have any uncertainty, guess an answer and mark it A, B, C, D. Do not leave it blank. Mark the question and move on. When you get to the end of the exam, if you have time left over, you can go back and review the questions you've marked. So let's say you get to the end of the exam, you have 10 minutes left, and there's 4 questions you marked. Now you can go back to one of those questions and spend time trying to answer it. But the reason you can't spend too much time on any one question is because for the exams that we're dealing with, the exams we're taking, every question is equal. Gives you the equal number of points. And so when you get a simple definition question that takes you 14 seconds to answer, that's +1. And when you do a difficult question where you calculate the weighted average cost of capital or some large calculation and you get it correct, that's +1 also. There's no bonus points for getting a difficult or a long question correct. Because all of the questions are equal, you need to make certain that you answer all of the questions you know. And it's possible that questions 98, 99, and 100, whatever the number of your last 3 questions are, it's possible that those are all very simple, easy questions that will take you 15 seconds. So if you get to the end of the exam, you get those 3 questions correct. But if you spend too much time on question 17 and 33 and 49 and 61 and 71, and you get to the last minute of the exam and you still have 5 questions left, and you just go A, you may not have gotten those 3 easy questions correct. You want to make certain you get every question that you know correct. And the only way you can do that is by seeing every question. But if you don't see all of the questions because it took you too long in the beginning of the exam, you miss those 2, 3, 4 questions at the end that are easy and that you would absolutely get correct. And so the time management part on the actual exam is don't spend too much time on any one question because it's worth the same amount as that simple, short, easy question that takes you 15 seconds to answer. We need to use our time well. And that's answering the easy questions. If at the end we have time to come back and spend time on those long, difficult calculations, absolutely we'll do that. But when you have that long question and you're going to skip it, you need to make certain you answer it first. If you guess, you have a 25% chance of getting the question correct. If you leave it blank, it's 0. There's no penalty for guessing. There's no penalty for incorrect answers. And so every time you read a question, you need to answer it. You may also want to mark it so you can come back for it later. But you need to make certain that you've answered all of the questions as you go through it the first time. You can come back later for any that you want more time with if you have that time. And also keep in mind that even if you're going to guess for a question, you can do things to increase your chances. Okay, if you sit down and there's 4 choices, you have a 25% chance. If you're able to read those 4 choices and determine that one of them cannot be correct, if one of them is not a possibility of being correct, you're now up to a 33% chance. If you're able to eliminate 2 of the choices, you're now up to 50% on your guess. And a good example of this is internal controls. Okay, when the question comes down, internal controls is, I think, the area that has a lot of gray area, a lot of area for arguing what should or shouldn't be done. But when the question says, what should the company do to test this? What should the company do to prevent this? Whatever the case may be. You read all 4 choices, and all 4 choices may seem like very good controls that a company should have. But if you go back to the question and you say, okay, this question is about cash disbursements, paying cash. What are the controls for paying cash? And you read choice A and you say, this is actually about receiving cash. Well, don't guess choice A, it's wrong. Okay, we may not know which of the 3 controls they have are the best for this situation, but at least we're guessing between the controls that are connected to cash disbursements. So before you completely guess on a question, see if there's 1 or 2 of the choices that you can eliminate simply because they're not connected to the same topic that the question is. It's not a true statement. Okay, what they put sometimes in questions is not a true statement. If you're doing a question and it asks you which term is the right answer, and of the 4 choices, you've never heard of one of the choices, the term means nothing to you, don't guess that term. Okay, if that term were to be the correct answer, we would have it in our materials. And so make an educated guess in terms of, are there 1 or 2 of the choices that we're able to eliminate as simply incorrect? Or are we able to say, well, these are 2 the better choices. I'm going to guess between these 2. The exam and the time pressure that comes with it is real. It's a difficult exam. There are difficult questions. There's a time pressure. But you just need to make certain that as you're going through all of this process, you manage it as much as possible. And on the exam, we've already said it, just recap here at the end. It's a matter of not spending a lot of time on any one question your first time through the exam. So when you come to that long question, that difficult question, the question you don't think you've ever heard of, answer it, A, B, C, D, mark it, and move on. All of the questions are of equal weight. Your goal is to get as many of those questions correct as possible. And so you need to make certain that you read all of the questions and you make certain that you get all of the questions that you know correct. So then those questions that are left where you're not certain or you want to do more calculations or you want to think about it some more, do that at the end if you have time. As I also said, this process of managing time, the content, it all starts while you're practicing. It all starts now while you're practicing. But don't focus on speed at the beginning. The focus is on learning the material. which means there may be a time you sit down to study and you say, I've got 30 minutes, I'm going to do 15 questions. Well, it turns out after your 30 minutes, you're on question number 9. That's okay. You may have had to do some reading. You may have wanted to go watch a video again about something, but you're learning. When you're studying and you're going through the content and learning the content, some of the MCQs are going to take longer. But as you learn that content, as you're able to draw on that information in your mind more quickly, the speed will come. The speed will come as you go through and you do your practice, as you get that experience. And then when you get ready to take your actual exam, your speed will be what it needs to be. So again, it's intimidating, especially when you start and there's 2,000 questions you're supposed to do or whatever the number is for your exam. One by one, you'll study them. One by one, you'll learn it. And when you get to the exam, you're confident. You know the knowledge, you have the skills. You're looking for those words that are extreme words that you need to pay attention to. I guess one other tip, and we get this question a lot more than you would think. And so this is a real thing, and it's a real thing to pay attention to. There is the difference between what I call a positive question and a negative question. And a positive question is, which one of these should the accountant do? Okay, that's a positive question. We're looking for something that we should do. There's also a negative question. Which of the following should the accountant not do? That word not is important. It changes the correct answer dramatically. And so we get questions, people write into the forum and they say, why is this choice wrong? And the explanation is, well, they're asking for what the auditor should not do. What you selected was absolutely what the auditor should do. You chose what should be taken into account when we calculate depreciation. The question was asking what should not be taken into account. And so identifying that word not in the question is important. Okay, and so if you read through and you think, wow, these 3 choices all seem like they're correct, go back and read the question. Maybe the question is a negative. Which of the following is not something, or however they want to phrase it. And that will make that one choice that's unique, obviously the correct answer. So as you're studying, I know it's long, I know it's difficult, and I know it sometimes gets very boring and tedious, but it's part of the process. And if you use that time well while you're studying and learning the content while you're doing the MCQs, you'll get to the exam absolutely ready to pass and to make certain that you get all of those questions that you know correct. And that's really what you need to keep in mind as you go into your exam. Your goal is to make certain that you answer all of those questions that are easy for you. All of those questions that you're prepared for, all of the questions that just don't take you much time at all. Then the questions where you need to think, where you need to apply something, you'll have more time to spend for those questions. But you need to make certain that if the last 3 questions of your exam are easy, you get there. And you read those questions and you get those questions correct. And that's time management. And that starts with question number 1 of the exam and making certain you don't spend any extra time on a question that's going to prevent you from getting to the end of the exam.